says, the unspiritual or natural man does not receive the gifts of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The version she sent to me was the natural man, and that comes from King James. What I find is very helpful anytime we're looking at a Bible passage to look at different versions, because they will throw a whole different light on a passage sometimes. And I would have thought, just my normal thinking, that a natural man would be a normal human being. And it kind of is. But they come out with new translations and say it means a person really who does not have a spiritual awareness. And that makes more sense with the context when you read the context, because it says that spiritual things are folly to this natural man or this unspiritual man. And so the question is, what is this? What are we talking about? And there's another aspect of this, too, that you have to think about when you're looking at Scripture, is who wrote this. It comes from Paul. When he considers somebody unspiritual, he's probably thinking of people that have not accepted the Christian message that he taught. He was one of the most famous, profound Christian missionaries, that's ever lived. When you read his life and some of the things he did, it's just absolutely incredible. The amount of energy that he expressed. And to put him in perspective, are you aware that he was beheaded? Probably in Rome. And that was done about 20 years prior to the appearance of Mark, the Gospel of Mark. Mark appeared in 70, and Paul was put to death 55, 60, something like that. So 10, 15, 20 years difference. We don't know exactly when that happened, but Paul's letters were the first part of the New Testament to show up. He was the first writer, and he started writing probably around 50 AD, and spanned through several years there where he wrote his letters to the different churches. So it's helpful to put that in perspective, because the gospel writers were all undoubtedly aware of Paul's letters. And much of what we have in the traditional mainstream Christian terminology comes from Paul. And he influenced, I have no doubt that he influenced Mark. Matthew and Luke used all of the Gospel of Mark in their own. They plagiarized totally, which was legal at that time. They didn't look at it then like we do now. But those two used Mark. So if you want to know kind of the source of the gospel story, you go back to Paul first, and then you step up to Mark. Mark was the first one to put the life of Jesus into story form. And then Matthew and Luke came out with their versions, and they're all different. John is completely different. He came around maybe 90 to 110 AD. They don't know exactly. Some of the earliest versions of John could have been written, they think, around 70, but they don't know that for sure. But it's a fascinating study. But to put things in perspective again, Paul was the first, and then you had Mark, and then Matthew, Luke, and then John later. And so it just helps kind of understand where this language comes from, where the ideas come from, and what they're talking about. When Paul talks about Christ, 100% of the time, he's talking about Jesus. He's not talking about the soul or the spiritual dimension in us, like we have adopted that idea. And in one sense, that's, we can look at it that way. But the Christ was the Messiah. The term Christ, Messiah, and then Jesus are all synonymous. Before Jesus showed up, Christ and Messiah were synonymous, but there was no face to the names until Jesus came along. And the Jewish community basically did not accept Jesus as the expected Messiah. They're still waiting. So They would even, according to John, they would throw people out of the synagogue if they declared Jesus was the Christ. So there was a battle going on, and by the time John was written, the Christians and Jews were coming very close to splitting. And they didn't really do that till about 35 years later, 135 or so, 50, 60 years later, during the last Jewish revolt, the Jews revolting against Rome, the Roman occupation. It's a very complicated history, but it helps to put it in perspective. But so when Paul is talking about an unspiritual person, he's probably talking about a person who has not accepted the Jesus Christ story, the Jesus Christ message that he taught. And all you have to do is read his letters, and you'll see how adamant he was. God and man were separate, and Jesus was the way to God. That was the perspective. Whether or not Jesus taught this, we don't know. We can't really tell. We know that's the mindset of the early church, and today's mainstream Christian church has accepted that, has patterned itself after that. So we look at the terms here, natural or unspiritual. So King James Version translates as natural man, while newer versions translate as unspiritual man. The New International Version translates as the person without the Spirit. Without the Spirit, not a spirit. So that leads me to believe they're talking about the spirit of the teaching, the spirit of the message that the early church was teaching. So what Paul calls the unspiritual or natural man is a person we would consider as having no interest in spiritual matters, a strict materialist. This would be one who accepts matter as the basis of reality, and therefore the body as the basis of our identity. To be spiritually discerning is to be intuitively awakened to the reality of our spiritual essence. So I've got a picture here of a white coat, basically, and a stethoscope. And I'm not picking on the medical community by any means, because there are scientists that embrace a spiritual dimension. Many of them do not. Many of the textbooks, present, and many people that go through medical training will say that it's just a given that when a body dies, that's it. The person's gone, and it's a failure. And so when near-death stories were presented, it used to be that could get you put into a mental ward if you talked about having an experience while your body was pronounced dead. You could be committed, and not that long ago. And I think what we're seeing now is there's a lot of education, a lot of training going on in this area, and it's with hospice and some of the organizations that deal with this. There's a whole new understanding, but the near-death experiences that I listen to still, some of them very recent, they will be afraid to talk to their doctor about this kind of thing because they, if they had this incredible experience, they'll be afraid. So much of science is based on materialism. In fact, the essence of science is based on materialism. Everything came from matter, and without matter, there is no life. So what we want to do is make a distinction between life and a life form, because you can have life and not have a life form. You can't have a life form without life, but you can have life without the life form. And the life essence of life is an energy, and it finds expression through life forms. So when we think of it from this perspective, we are all expressions of life. We talk about oneness. We talk about unity between ourselves, and why do we like our animals? Why do we feel comfortable with living things? Why do we like plants and stuff? There's a compatibility. There's something that you can't really put your finger on, but you feel you're sharing something with this life form. And we are. What we're sharing with them is life, that energy. But it is everywhere present. God is life. It's everywhere present, but expressing through each of us. And when the body drops off, when we drop off the body, we continue on. And that's something everybody has to work out themselves. I'm not trying to get up here and say, this is how it happens. This is what I have come to absolutely accept as true, that I am not my body. I have a body, and I am much more than that, and I will continue on my experience. But a materialist would not say that. They would say, when your body's gone, so are you. You need a brain, you need a physical body, physiology. Keep picking up the wrong thing here. Scientific materialism cannot conceive of the existence of the soul. Consciousness in life itself is dependent on the physical organism. The notion of consciousness surviving the death of the body is folly. It does not fit the materialistic model. So I'm kind of shifting here from maybe what Paul meant. I can't tell you exactly what he meant because I can't read his mind. I just see the context in which he wrote. He was always writing about this view based on Jesus, on the Jesus teachings. So I don't know that he was talking about the same thing I'm talking about here. But the idea that the soul can exist without a body, that to me would be spiritual understanding. One who would believe that it cannot is more the materialist, one that says you have to have a body to go on. But in truth, it doesn't matter how many textbooks are written to support the materialistic model of reality. Even Einstein could see past this limited view. And I came across this quote that I really like, and maybe you're familiar with it. We are slowed down sound and light waves, a walking bundle of frequencies tuned into the cosmos. We are souls dressed up in sacred biochemical garments, and our bodies are the instruments through which our souls play their music. Kind of a complicated explanation, but I still like it because he's saying we're souls. And that goes against the scientific protocol that the science basically says we're biochemical garments, or we're biochemical, period. And Einstein was borderline mystic. It's kind of hard to figure out where he was, because he was a very strong intellect, a brilliant scientist. But he had, as many scientists in his day did, a belief in God, a belief that there's a higher power at work in all of us. But I just like that picture. He's saying we're souls with this physical garment. And I would totally agree with that. And how he came to that conclusion, I don't know. But that was a kind of a given for him. And I have read people that other scientists that comment on some of the kinds of sayings like this that originated with Einstein, and they try to say that's not what he meant. He did not mean that. He meant something else, and they'll explain it from a materialist point of view. But I think he did mean it. He talked about intuition quite a bit as well, and the materialist doesn't like intuition because where does that come from? What is that? And what I think of as intuition, it's the larger self. It's the soul trying to break through, trying to push through the intellectual, the busyness. The yin is busy, so we have to have this birth of Christ in a manger someplace. It's a preoccupation at the intellectual level, and the soul pushes out all the time. It's pushing out all the time, and it is telling us something. It's guiding us. If we are not happy in the spiritual indoctrination we've received, we have to ask, why aren't we happy with that? What is it that's pushing? What is causing us to, or asking us to open our minds or come up higher, look at some other alternative. To me, that's the most powerful force that we are all pushed by, is why did we question that which we were given, that which we were told is true? And that's the intuition pushing through, pushing out and through. And it's a very powerful thing. So one of the questions Lasagna raised is, what is spiritual discernment and how do we develop it? How do we become spiritually discerning? And I say spiritual discernment comes with direct exposure. We still the intellect and allow spirit to impress upon our mind. This is why we stress meditation. We say that every person has access to God, and God not being an old man in the sky, but being that one presence and one power in which we live and move and have our being. And I've always loved that phrase, because I can see that I am living, moving, and having my being in this infinite energy that is expressing through me, that I'm one with it at all times, and that I'm not ever able to actually separate myself from it. I can believe I'm separate, and I can act just exactly like I am, because I can suffer. I can go through a lot of problems thinking I'm separate from God. I can think I've sinned and feel like I've angered God. I can feel all kinds of things. I can treat God like a man, in other words, having the same kinds of emotions as would any man, that I can offend God in some way. Jesus talked about the sun and the rain fall on the just and the unjust. You know, it's saying that God is not affected by our attitudes. We are affected by our attitudes. So we can be in the presence of God and not be aware of it. We want to be aware of it. I talked a couple of weeks ago about say you have a pool of water, and you've got 10 people looking at it, and they're all 10 guessing what's the temperature of that water. And they all develop their theories. There's someone that comes up and says, well, I stepped in it myself, and it's very warm. And somebody else steps up and says, no, I stepped in it, it was very cold. So you've got opinions, and then you've got the 10 people saying, well, I wonder, I really trust that person, so I'll go with them. You know, I'll hold their opinion. Well, what we really want to do is walk over and step in the pool ourselves. And the moment we do, the question is answered. Is this warm or cold? So that's direct experience. What we say is, in meditation, you become still the intellectual side of the thinking busyness of the mind, and with practice, you are impressed by that presence. You become aware of it. It's a very subtle thing at first, and then it becomes more pronounced as you trust yourself, moving deeper into that awareness. But it's a living thing. It's a living presence, the very essence of our being. And I don't know how to develop that, except to just say, keep showing up and keep trying. You know, this is one of the biggest complaints I hear is, how do you do it? I wish I could tell you. Well, I can tell you. I just can't put you in the pool. I can barely put myself in it. You know, I get out of that pool so often I forget what the temperature is like sometimes. But that's what spiritual discernment is. It's a knowing, is a direct experience. And the experience I have had with that level of energy, that level of, and there's no doubt I would label it divine. It is absolutely divine. It is the source of my being. There's no question in my mind about that. And I have read about that in books, but it's not the same as stepping in the pool. And so we read the books to say, go step in the pool, keep working on it. You know, Jesus said, ask, knock, keep at it until something opens up. Because he said that everybody who asks will receive. And that's how do you ask? You just keep showing up. You keep working with this. And you don't have to. That's the beauty of it, is nobody's making us do anything on this level. But watch yourself. What is it in you that caused you to come here in the first place? What is it in you that caused you to start asking questions about the normal type of thinking that you were given? That's the thing that's pushing you. So you've already stepped in your pool. At least you put your toe in it. When there's something that you're saying, I don't think I fully trust that the water's hot or cold. I don't know what it is right now, but it's, I'm asking questions. I'm opening my mind, to something else. So spiritual discernment is, I don't know if it's a thing that we develop or a thing we arrive at. It's a time when we start asking questions and we start considering alternatives to what we have come to know as true. Okay, so then she says, what are our spiritual senses? Jesus said several times, if you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. And that's pretty important, because he's not talking about eyes and ears. The body's eyes and ears are the physical counterparts to the soul's perceptual faculties. Some people who have near-death experiences, this is fairly common, will say, I could see 360 degrees same time. We're looking pretty much straight out. We can't see clear around. I can't even imagine that. It's like the image that comes to my mind when I read about something like that is you're just an eyeball and you're looking every direction at once. I don't know how that happens, but they act like it's just as natural and normal. That's our normal sight. But we get into this body and it all sucks down to, the physical vision. And it's the same with our hearing. This is extremely common. People talk about they don't hear anything. They don't see lips move when they're talking to a being of light or a dead relative or anything like that. It's telepathic. That's how they hear. It's direct knowing. It's like if I was standing here and you were able to pick up what I thought and I didn't have to talk, it would be a direct communication, vice versa. And that's an interesting thing, that when some people have these experiences, they come back and that veil has been lifted. Suddenly they pick up the thoughts of people around them. And sometimes they say that's a scary thing. They don't want it. It's probably more of a blessing than we realize, that we can only hear one at a time. And you've all been in rooms where people, there's just a whole lot of chatter going on. You can't really, you pick out things here and there from people, but what if it was that way all the time? And nobody's saying a word, but you're picking up all of their thinking. It would be a pretty traumatic thing. So there's a reason why we can't do that, probably, in a body. But what they also say is when they are on the operating table or wherever they are, they know the thoughts of all the medical team. They know the thoughts of all the people in the waiting room. They know the thoughts of everybody, that they're around or even think about. And I don't know how that works. I don't know how it can work, but in that state, they're able to sort it out. But what I'm saying is we all have these abilities. We step into a body, it becomes our sight, our vision, and it becomes our hearing. And so that helps us distinguish these things. So our spiritual senses are kind of reduced down to something that can manage the information that we get in this three-dimensional experience. And that's probably a very great blessing. And then she says, what is the difference, or she asks, what is the difference between third and fourth dimensional thinking? And I had to ask her what she meant by that. And three-dimensional thinking is what most of us do. It's based on our experience in the body, three-dimensional, the three-dimensional life that we live. It's does my car have enough gas in it? What am I going to have for lunch today? How much longer is the minister going to talk? That kind of thing. It's the stuff we're dealing with here now. The fourth dimensional thinking, is living this life understanding that we're not this body. There's something more to us than that. And some people actually think out of that awareness. I like to think that when Jesus said a lot of the things he said, he was not speaking out of a three-dimensional awareness. He was speaking out of a fourth-dimensional awareness. When he would say things like the Father and I are one, for example, there aren't too many three-dimensional people that will speak from that level, from that understanding. But we all have that. It's just that when he would say I, many times, he's speaking from that fourth dimension, from that spiritual dimension. And it's confusing to people because they're hearing him as the man speaking, as the three-dimensional man. And that's what is confusing about some of the sayings attributed to him. So that's how I would define the difference. It's just simply understanding that I am more than my body. And the materialist does not believe that. They think they are the body, that the whole consciousness is kind of a fluke. That's how it was actually described, as an unexplainable fluke that happened for our identity to even exist. And I find it difficult to believe that scientists would say that, would come to that kind of conclusion. But I also understand why they would not go with much of the religious thought that most of us are exposed to. But there's another alternative. There's another way to look at all of it. So that's kind of the path we're on, I believe. So I know people who are religious mainstream thinkers, but they never question their religious inheritance. So you could be, I guess, from Paul's perspective, you could be an unspiritual person just by saying, okay, I was born into this. It is truth to me, and it's been given by authority, so I accept it. I don't question it. It'd be a person who's not interested in going beyond what they've been taught. Why do we question our religious inheritance? That's what I was saying earlier. That's the thing that has caused us to step upon the path less trodden, the path less taken, exiting the mainstream superhighway and asking questions that are not answered there. And again, I've talked to many people that are coming from that place, and I totally respect where they're coming from. What we need to all ask ourselves is, what made me step off the mainstream thinking? What made me step away from it? And the answer that you get is that's your spirit, your soul pushing out, saying there's more to you than you have come to know to this point. Because we've heard the larger self, the soul knocking at the door of our consciousness, waiting for us to open. That's what I think it is, what we call the intuitive listening. It's that part of us that is larger than just the material side, the body-based self-image. So it's alive and active. You don't even have to ask, how do I develop it? It's developing you, basically, is what it comes down to. It's the thing that's pushing out through you. It is you. It's you saying to your other self, to your material, physical self, there's more to you than you've come to know up to this point. And you're saying, I know that, I just don't know how to get to it. Or I don't know how to get to it all the time. So that's what it is. This knocking might be interpreted as an annoyance or disturbance, but we're curious enough to open the door. Everyone who comes here voluntarily has opened a door of some kind. We're all different, all coming from different places. But something has caused us to step into this particular arena. And that something is the Spirit of truth unfolding through us. It's our intuitive side, our intuitive nature. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in independent unity, and have a wonderful week.